All right, welcome to my channel. This is Blacklight Astrology. My name is Laura Black, and I'm bringing you my take on the Scorpio full moon of 2025. This is happening at 22 degrees of Scorpio, opposite the sun at 22 Taurus. The sun is conjunct Uranus in this lunation, which is quite a signature, would be quite a signature on its own. Sun conjunct Uranus opposite the moon in Scorpio is like a jolt of electricity in Kundalini awakening, like a very rude awakening, a very dark realization that's kind of forcing the perspective or inviting a perspective. The force comes in when we look at the fact that there's a finger of God in this full moon cycle. So the finger of God is a fated aspect. It's a stress aspect in a birth chart, in this case cornered by Jupiter and Chiron to the moon itself, which means it's only going to last for like, an hour, maybe like 5 hours at most, if we're thinking about kind of the orb being within the orb of influence as the moon passes through this space. But nonetheless, there is a finger of God at play, and a finger of God is the stress aspect that brings fate. This is ever the debate for me internally in astrology. Do we have free will? I don't know how much free will there is, but I am a double yod bearer. So if you have a finger of God in your birth chart, you might, if it's ever been activated, you might know what I'm talking about when I say that it sure does feel like you're on an absolute fated path. One of my astrology friends told me once that they heard a finger of God described as being on a short leash with the universe. Like you're being tugged along. It's just your life doesn't belong to you, my teacher used to say, until this finger of God issue gets activated. And what it universally is for a native individual in a birth chart is a promise that they would break a pattern in their family line. It's usually a generational trauma, healer or a curse breaker, a chain breaker. In this case, we're seeing it as a brief moment in time that the entire world is experiencing. It's still got this measure of fate to it, and somewhere out there in the world, there will certainly be some kind of fated event. Here in the United States, we're getting curious because Uranus is currently coming for Donald Trump's midheaven. The part of the chart that describes the public image, the reputation of the native, as well as their kind of career, their purpose in the world, their legacy is what this really is. And, Donald Trump is our current president of the United States. We'll save those thoughts for some other time. This is definitely hitting his chart in quite a massive way. So our eyes are peeled, our ears are wide open here, and as United States astrologers, as we approach this lunation. What this finger of God is really doing is absolutely forcing an awareness. Scorpio wants to dig deep to the core of an issue, right? This is a water sign that likes to dive into what is unspoken, what's not being said, what is felt under the surface, and what are the really deep core emotional motivations for people to do anything. So wherever this is happening in your chart, you might be forced to recognize a pattern of why there's certain behaviors or certain values in place in your life, where there's maybe some toxicity or manipulation that you're going to have to look at and transform. This is big shadow work signature. Jupiter in Gemini has been expanding all of our perspectives. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance coming to the surface for people, I think, these days. And we're starting to realize that truth might not, there are some shades of truth of what we experience that are not universal, that are based on our perception, perspective, and our mindset. And as things are shifting rapidly in the world, we had this Jupiter square Saturn signature that we just got through this past August, September, October of 2024. And that is kind of a forced expansion of our awareness and understanding of how systems of control, Saturn, ruler of Capricorn, can come into play in our belief systems or tap into or utilize belief systems or utilize fear as a part of the matrix of a belief system to control people. As Saturn and Neptune are inching closer together, which will be really happening all through 2026, but we're having a little preview taste of it this May, June, July. This is one of the things that we see come up under Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Now, if you're watching this channel for my story, you might already know that I was raised in the Mormon church and I have escaped from a high control religious group and now have a fascination with why people believe what they believe and how we get into these systems of high control that want to dominate our thoughts, our emotions, our behavior, and our access to information. One of the things that happens when Neptune and Saturn become conjunct, which happens every, 36, 37 years, is we start to hear conversations around cults and high control groups that are spiritual in nature or somehow doing something that's very manipulative or kind of nefarious, that is exerting control, exhibiting control over the participants within the system or the structure. So here we are approaching that conjunction under this lunation. We're not quite there yet, but we're starting to see things differently. We're starting to really have to shift paths, shift gears, and we're starting to have to step into a lot of the confidence healing, the healing of the sense of self, and our connection with self that we've been cultivating for, really the last couple of years. We've all been going through it with the South Node in Libra over the last couple of years. We were all forced to sort of reckon with how we address conflict, who we really want to be, how we assert ourselves, and how we, who we're aligning with, who we're our contracts with, who are the partners that we really want in our lives, that we want to maintain harmonious balance with. It was war and peace times, and now it's leading to a forced, deep understanding of the underlying patterns in our relationships. This full moon is asking us to dig deeper into understanding the psychology of something. The forced bit comes in with the finger of God. So if I take all this red nonsense away and I just draw out the finger of God here, you can see that there is sort of a slingshot kind of representation to this triangle. There's one corner of the slingshot up here with Chiron. There's one in other corners. This is like the little Y-pronged slingshot tool. And then we have the rock that's being pulled back, the moon itself. And you can see those long red lines are like the rubber band stretching. We're drawing this back and feeling the tension of it. All of the energy is being funneled into the moon at the moment that this full moon perfects. And we resolve the conundrum of the finger of God. We kind of release or find a solution to the issue by releasing that rock, the moon, through to the other side, which lands in this case in the sun itself, aligned with Uranus, the Great Awakener. So wherever Taurus falls in your chart, particularly if you use the Placidus system as I do, the later degrees of Taurus, the last decan of Taurus, the last 10 degrees, you want to find out where 22 to 26 degrees of Taurus falls and 22 degrees of Scorpio, and then look at those houses and see where you can understand where this is coming up in your own personal chart. I will actually insert an image right here of the houses and what they mean so that you can pull this up in your own chart and kind of identify for yourself the themes of this area of life that's being illuminated by this finger of God. This full moon is in Scorpio, and so technically there are two rulers to this lunation. There is Mars, the ancient ruler of Scorpio, which is sitting at 11 degrees of Leo, just past its opposition to Pluto, which we all experienced recently. That was quite a dynamic shift coming out of that Mars retrograde that had us feeling very lethargic, very unmotivated, very sluggish, and highly emotional all through the winter. But now we're moving forward from that, and we're getting this fresh, bold rush of energy that's pushing us to face our fears and stand up to the bully in our lives, whether that's an internal bully or an external one. It can very easily be internal when the South Node is in Virgo and we're facing our big shame monsters and the inner critic and our own expectations of ourselves and others, and how when things don't live up to those standards and we can't have control over the outcome of things, what happens as a result of that? So we're all having to kind of examine those dark Virgo shadows lately. This standing up to the bully kind of signature in the chart that's saying, okay, let's take those steps, have courage, push forward. Yeah, it can be quite a lot. It can be daunting. There may be external foe, so to speak, or challengers, but for many of us, this might be coming, the call is coming from inside the house. You know what I'm saying? And we know that because the ruler of the South Node in this lunation, South Node in Virgo, the ruler is Mercury, the mind, which at the time of this full moon, Mercury will have just slipped into the sign of Taurus. I love this. My own Mercury is in Taurus. I'm a Gemini sun with Mercury, the ruler of my Gemini sun, and Mars and North Node in the sign of Taurus. And man, can I talk? We just ramble. I was born for it. So, hey, YouTube, what's up? Thanks for listening. Okay, editing Laura here because hilarious side note, as I went off on a rant of rambling and talking about Mercury and Taurus, I never actually got to the point of why I said we know that the call might be coming from inside the house, which was that Mercury and Taurus is squaring Pluto in Aquarius at this time of this lunation. So Mercury, the mind, and our cognitive function and our communication systems, squaring Pluto, the lord of the underworld that wants to dig into the deep human psychology and find, and analyze and really examine. But the square angle is what gives it away that the call might be coming from inside the house because the opposition happens. Often it comes as energy from somebody opposing us. And while the square can certainly involve conflict with another, we always have to kind of examine when there are squares involved with these, especially when Mercury is involved in the square, because it's the stories we tell ourselves. It's the lies or the denial or our inability to see into our own thinking and psychology. Calls from coming from inside the house, so watch out for that this lunation. Mercury is squaring the planet Pluto at this point. It's an exact square to the degree. Here we have got the demand, the incessant need, this penetrating, profoundly curious mind, this deep curiosity that's going to dig to get to the core of an issue and solve the problem, particularly in the realm of values and finances and wherever we can stabilize in our lives. This may even have to do with addressing health issues via nutrition. That's one big pattern I could see for the South Node in Virgo, ruled by Mercury in Taurus, a sign associated with the pleasure of the five senses. Taurus is one of the signs associated with the material of food and the enjoyment of eating. And Mercury in Taurus is squaring Pluto in Aquarius, and Pluto in Aquarius is saying, let's dig to the bottom of the issue and find a way to solve the problem that likely relates to our own nervous system or something happening to the masses through our understanding, Mercury, of food, Taurus. Now, that's my take on that, at least. So I think a lot of us that are now on this health journey that has been coming up with the South Node in Virgo, Virgo being a sign associated with the process of purification. It's an earth sign that's about what we can do to be practical and take action steps to make improvements in our lives. And here it's with the South Node in Virgo, we are all on some kind of health journey. And we're all having to face the fact that the standard traditional methods to purify and improve our health might not be working, or at least not as they are understood by the mainstream of our society. And so we might have to dig. Ruler of the South Node, Mercury, squaring Pluto. And if you want to throw in Lilith there, we've actually got this T-square with Lilith. So that's just some of my thoughts on one of the ways that I'm reading this. Saturn, Neptune coming together soon. I was talking about it in terms of us hearing a lot about cults, false messiahs, weird paranormal activity, and that's all true. I heard it described as a cold shower, Neptune being rain and a shower and water energy, and Saturn being this cold, kind of crushing energy there. So yeah, a super hard reality check, or, dealing with the ways in which we avoid reality. Neptune likes to slip away and sneak away from things. The ways in which we dissolve reality or use delusion to deal with the harshness of this real world. As those two come together, though, one of the other things we see, like I just keep circling it and kind of coloring over it. I don't know why I do this. As these two planets come together, one of the other things that we see a lot is disease, unfortunately. Saturn itself, Saturn, ruler of Capricorn. Capricorn is about the systems and structures of things in this material world. And it's the most powerful of the earth signs. It's the most wizened, complex. It's the most evolved of the earth signs. So when you think of Saturn slash Capricorn energy in terms of systems, physical structures and systems, you could say that this physical body and an understanding of its full, maturation cycle and all components that it needs to keep homeostasis and to keep wellness. That would be, Saturn could be in that realm of structures and systems. And when Saturn and Neptune come together, well, that system somehow is dissolved, or there's something hazy over it. There's something confusing. There's something about hormones or the circulatory system, or, any of these things that are associated with Neptune slash Pisces, this water sign that ebbs and flows, in which Saturn actually resides at the time of this lunation. So definitely there's a lot about health and what health truly is. And since Saturn and the North Node are in the sign of Pisces, there is a call, a demand. Saturn says, grow up and get serious, come this way and put in the effort. And in Pisces, he's saying, look, it's really important that you develop strong boundaries, that you take care of your psychological, your mental health, that you find time to have peace and quiet and rest. That rest and compassion and forgiveness even are necessary parts of your healing journey. We cannot just Virgo it up and just constantly drill and be working and finding, more projects and one more cleanse and one more of this routine. It's like, what if sometimes things get messy and the healing journey is not linear? And you have to kind of experiment and get creative, and you might need to consider one's emotional health or spiritual health or creative health. These are key components of our well-being as humans. You might need to integrate those as a part of your healing journey. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are two technical rulers of this lunation cycle. We've got Mars in Leo as the ancient ruler of Scorpio. And opposite, I did mention that they're doing this like just past the opposition thing, Mars just past that tension point opposite Pluto. Well, now Pluto is the other ruler of Scorpio, the modern ruler. And Pluto, again, here squaring Mercury, the ruler of the South Node in this case, where a lot of karmic baggage is coming up to be reviewed and recognized and moved through and released. Pluto's over here being like, we are not playing. We are digging into society and the way that our organizations or our kind of cultural groups, ways in which they're not super helpful, ways in which community has died or transformed over the last, several years with the evolution of technology. How are we living as a community, as a society, globally and locally? And what do we need to improve that? And, this is a 20-year journey where we're getting to start to see some of the plutonic qualities. We're getting into the dark side here, some of the shadows of Aquarian themes emerging. We're looking at the dark side of AI as we're starting to grapple with what this tool could mean for humanity and how to utilize it best. We're looking at what that could be doing into the environment. We're trying to get a true and honest understanding of what it is that humans are doing to the environment. That's hugely debated, which, well, I'm saving my opinions. This is not about my opinion. But we're starting to realize some of these things and look at them differently. So this lunation is really, this might be the kind of full moon where somebody out there who doesn't believe in climate change is suddenly starting to recognize, like, oh, maybe, or this can be a big perspective shifting kind of lunation, where we might have had a strongly held opinion or ideal before, an ideology, let's say, especially if it was aligned with a group, if we identified with a community or a culture, and we were holding on to that kind of perspective because of our social ties and cues, or the ways that we look for kind of confirmation from a group to validate our perspective, or living in that echo chamber. This could be a lunation where somehow we're kind of forced out of that echo chamber. It's a really interesting, potent full moon. Venus, the goddess of love and beauty and abundance, who is the ruler of the sun in this lunation. We're a little more focused on the ruler of the moon because this is a full moon chart that we're looking at. But let's do consider the ruler of the sun in this case. We've got Venus in Aries, and she's important here because Mars is the ruler of Venus, and Mars is one of the rulers of this whole chart, being the ruler of the lunation that we're talking about. So Venus and Mars are actually trining each other in this chart. This is awesome. We've got the ruler of the moon, or one of them, Mars, ruling this lunar focus here, having the best relationship, the best flow of energy with the ruler of the sun and Uranus. that means that both sides of this finger of God, both the issue being pointed at and the solution to which we release, are in a beautiful contact together. There is harmony, there is support in recognizing these patterns, these shadows, the manipulations where we have given up on our values or kind of let our values slip in the name of, meshing with somebody else, which can be a sort of enmeshment to take on somebody else's values. This can be about money and debt. This can be about worth and healing. Whatever it is, wherever this is happening in your life and whatever these Taurus Scorpio qualities are that are emerging, the conversation wants to be smooth. That's ill said because Mercury, the conversation planet, is in this crazy tense square to Pluto, which and a T-square to Black Moon Lilith, if you want to extend it, which does say that there is conversation to be had and it's very, very deep and potent. And if you're willing to go there, if you're willing to get real, this lunation can be amazing for creating a deeper bond, for having a real, getting to the bones, getting into the depths of understanding with somebody, going in deep. But I don't know that I would say smooth, you know? So there is a conversation. It is deep. It can be rattling, though it could be very intense, but the breakthrough is worth it. The payoff is hits you right in the heart. The release point to that T square is smack into Leo, and it brings up more creativity and passion and boldness and courage to do that thing that we have to do, to face the bully or our fears or overcome the obstacle and just do the thing, make the move, take the stand. So I did want to throw that in there because there is support around all of this. There's some big scary like, oh, what are we gonna have to see and recognize? But it's like, look, whatever it is, especially if it has anything to do with creativity, relationships, values, self-worth, something that we want to create and some action we want to take to express ourselves, there is support coming through for this. So we're finally feeling the fire and the passion return. It's going to get louder and louder. We are building up momentum. Boy, howdy, things are getting busy. And it's about to get so busy, it's going to make our heads spin. As soon as June rolls around, we get on into Gemini season. Watch out. My gosh. This lunation is saying we've got to dig. Dig, don't deny. Because honestly, have you guys seen the Clockwork Orange? A Clockwork Orange, is that what it's called? Finger of God chart. Sure does remind me of the Ludovico technique. Woo! So my little tagline for how to handle this full moon is dig, don't deny, or you will get the Ludovico technique in your eye. Sorry, that was terrible. I apologize for putting you all through that. There may be emotional manipulations that come up during this full moon. If we are not willing to get vulnerable and lean in and have the real talks and look at our own shit, this is the kind of full moon, always in the Scorpio axis, there's this, it's an invitation to be very, very honest and just go in deep to the absolute core painful thing, which most people will do anything to avoid pain. So be mindful of that because there may be some ugly truths coming out, and it's better to surrender and embrace the reality, the conversation, the going in deep, than to resist it and have it, sting us in some other way. Expect deep conversations, even if it's within your own self. You'll be doing a lot of analyzing. You might start to really see and sense the heaviness, the shadow of this inner critic and shame patterns. I think shame is such a big part of this conversation under this full moon. How shame has gotten us all into our current the places where we are least content or most, dissatisfied in our lives. The places where we still are not ready to deal and dig. That's often like shame is one of those emotions. Nobody wants to deal with that shit. That is, oh, and it is coming up loud. That I did not mention. I'm just realizing I didn't mention that Jupiter will be squaring the nodes under this full moon. That's huge. Speaking of, the South Node getting very loud, Jupiter magnifies things. And look, if you're going to have a square to something, which a square, this short red line here, is the most challenging kind of conversation between these two entities. We're talking about the South Node of karma, and those icky patterns coming up to be looked at, dealt with, purified, moved through. And we're talking about Jupiter, which is meant to be auspicious. He's a benefic planet, but he will just sort of take us up to a place where we can have the largest field of view on a subject. Not the entire awareness, not the downloads of Kundalini energy that come in with your Uranus, but sort of like, okay, we went to college, we at least got a bachelor's degree, if not a master's, maybe a PhD, but we're not God here, you know? This is not Uranus. But Jupiter is magnifying and teaching us a great deal by expanding the South Node and likewise the North Node equally. And so he's kind of acting as this starting to expand and have multiple perspectives and starting to have this cognitive dissonance come up is really forcing a big kind of it's mental gymnastics. Oh my gosh, this is mental gymnastics that people are either going to be really doubling down on to get through whatever it is and to as a part of the denial process of what's coming up, or it's the cognitive dissonance that's going to force them to look at the truth because the release point of this Jupiter, look at all these red lines, you guys. This is what I do in readings. If you've ever had a reading with me, I'll like color all over your chart and people will be like, "What are all those lines?" And I'm like, "It's for me." I'm really just like marking as I talk about it. It's like the Gemini talking with my hands. I have to be like, "And this thing, and then this and this." Ugh, it's ridiculous. All right. I'm a silly clown. So we've got the South Node in Virgo, North Node in Pisces, and Jupiter squaring them. And Jupiter, by the way, is the ruler of the North Node in Pisces. It rules Pisces. And so Jupiter, both as we're trying to get to the North Node, but the ruler of this energy, and therefore the planet that's carrying that energy, is also fighting with that energy because it is over here getting this big perspective shift somewhere in our lives. And all of a sudden, we're having to have all this shame and criticism and control and demand come up, and perfectionism. And our creativity is calling to us, but oh, we're comparing to others, or we're seeing other things or other points of view, and it's somehow it's throttling us. It's tossing us back and forth between the nodes. So it's what that means is that it's very difficult to get on this dharmic path, this destiny line of the North Node right now, as we are being thrown back and forth into these different perspective shifts and challenging conversations that are driving us to expand our awareness, to expand our knowledge base, to try and seek more information. And in order to refine, really define what it is that we believe. And with that, I think I will close this video here and wish you all a very happy full moon and no, wait, not with that. Hold on. So with Jupiter, the ruler of the North Node, squaring the nodes, and we technically have this T-square between the North and South Node and then Jupiter. It's the same as that finger of God thing I showed you with the slingshot, except this time my teacher Deborah Silverman calls it the bow and arrow. We've got this bow, we've got the arrow, and we're pulling it back, and these are the strings here, right? Now we are releasing Jupiter straight through to the other side, and it lands at 23 degrees of Sagittarius. This suggests that one of the solutions for dealing with the kind of the mental gymnastics tendencies and the cognitive dissonance or the arguments that might come up in this is to get outside. Go outdoors, especially if you're in the northern hemisphere. Hopefully it's starting to get a little nicer for you wherever you are, and go be in nature. Honesty is the best policy for this full moon. Denial will only build up in the pattern that you've been locked in that's trying to be forced right here, the awareness that's trying to be forced. And that pattern, if you become more deeply entrenched, if we become more deeply entrenched in our patterns, it's just going to bite us in the ass a little bit down the road, especially as Uranus comes to the critical degrees of Taurus through the summer. Oh my, and moves into Gemini. So we really do need to be willing to be honest under this full moon with ourselves, with others, and get outside, ground, reset, and then watch out for intense arguments and brash communications. This is a full moon to take a deep breath. Slow down. Mercury in Taurus can be such a know-it-all, can be so rigid in its thinking and mindset, can really push. And it's the bull, nobody can push the bull. So when they push and you push back, we get into a stalemate lockdown. So we gotta Look for the softness. Look for how we can be mentally supple and slow and gentle, even though we're going to be digging into some very, very intense ground in our conversations and making some hopefully massive changes and transformation based on what comes up under this full moon. All right, friends, that's it for this lunar cycle. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are interested in booking a session with me, you can visit my website, black-light-astrology.com. I'll include the link below. Thanks so much. Please hit like, hit subscribe, share this with somebody you think would find it interesting. It really helps boost the algorithm and get my videos out there. I so appreciate your support. Thanks for being here. Happy full moon in Scorpio. Stay curious.